Okay, let's take a look at the two Steves. Let's take you back to 1977 and deal with, yet again, some true visionaries. Share my screen here. Here they are, Steve Wozniak on the bottom and Steve Jobs on the top. These were two engineering geniuses. Now, Steve Jobs, there's a ton of stuff written on him. The movies are pretty crap, but you can actually watch him, right? You can go out on YouTube and see him and kind of see what he is. A lot of people will say, and you may have parents that say that Steve Jobs is just a good salesman. No, they don't understand technology. Sorry. Even if they were in technology, that is a silly thing to say about Steve Jobs. He understands technology, or I should say did, because he has now passed away. He understood it very well. But he did lie more on the visionary side of things. So Steve Wozniak, you would consider him the one that is really the technical founder of much of what happened in that day. He is the one that basically built this computer that had a monitor. Remember that the Altair didn't, right? That was kind of a thing. People would send it to a typewriter or something like that. And you'd say, that's weird. That's kind of stupid. Well, it took more interpretation and encoding to make a monitor work with the system. Secondly, a lot of the mainframe systems actually just printed out. You typed it, it printed it, right? So I know, sounds strange, but he creates something that has a little monitor on it. Well, his friend Steve Jobs comes over, and I already told you that Jobs had gotten a job with Atari and needed his help figuring out the chips and just coming out with just an awesome way to do it that Atari was like, holy crap. So these guys are engineers' sons. They're into engineering. They're going to school, right? You don't learn engineering in high school, but they're going to high school and doing that kind of stuff. And then, of course, when they graduate, they're looking for jobs that are going to get them into engineering while they're going to university. So Jobs comes over. Steve Wozniak's got stuff sitting down, and he's got this board, and it's mounted on a piece of wood. He's got it to a video thing, and he's like, "What you got there?" He's like, "Oh, this is my computer," And Jobs looks at it and goes, wow, that's awesome. Now, there was this homebrew computer club, and this has had a lot of writing on it. So again, you can read and watch videos on this. But basically what's happening is he's going to go down and show off, right? This is what I did. Right? This is like, I'm better than you. That's really what it is. I am not a football player. I will show you what I can build. Right. Engineers are very that way. Most of us are competitive that way. So he's going to take it down there and show it. Jobs is with him, and he realizes look at all these people that want a computer and they're trying to build their own. And look at Wozniak's computer is just so far advanced from what these people are doing. These people are not at the level of Woz. And what he did is just incredible. There's a market for this. So at this point, he's not seeing the vision of what society will be. He's seeing there's, probably thousands of people that would buy this machine. And so he talks to Wozniak. He's like, dude, let's sell this. Why aren't we selling this? Let's sell this. And Wozniak's like, no, I can't do that. This is my baby. And really at the core of it is that he's basically an interning with HP at this point, Hewlett Packard. They're into computers and all that. And he's like, as soon as they see that I have this, they will take it away. Now, you may not be aware, but when you're in that kind of line of work as an engineer, that's a deal the company makes. They're like, hey, you come work for us, but anything you make on your spare time, we own. Because they realize, right, that young blood of engineering, often a lot of things are created. And so he's like, I'm not going to do it, because as soon as I show them what I'm doing, they will take this away from me. And this is where the vision of Jobs comes in. He's like, dude, they're not going to even understand what they got. They're not going to get it. And it takes him a long time to convince Wozniak, but anybody that knew Steve Jobs knew that they call it that distortion field. He was able to just really convince people and motivate them that we can do this, we can do this. Some people have that. Thank goodness he went into computers and not politics, right? In any case, he convinces him. So they take this little Apple One in and hook it up to a little monitor that's hooked up to a little monitor. I wish I had a picture of that right here. Take it into the boss, HP, and say, yeah, we've got this little agreement that we'd like you to sign that gives us the ability, total control over this thing that Woz has built, that you're basically going to release him and say it's okay that he made this. And the big wig sits there and looks at it and is like, the personal computer? Who would want a personal computer? Computers are for sending people to the moon. They're for doing payroll for large organizations. They're for doing censuses. Computers are meant to have big things done with them. What would they use a computer for? What would an average person use a computer for? You guys are idiots. Let me sign that paper, get out. And of course, they take this computer, they sell it as a board. Basically, they fix up some things on it, sell it as a board in 76, and then sell it as a computer in 77. And of course, become two millionaires, and they're like 21, 22 years old, and they're millionaires. And so from that, you can kind of learn some things, right? You've got HP, the computer company, and basically his boss does not see what's even going on. It's not like these were the only two guys doing this. Like I said, Commodore has a computer that's coming out, and HP doesn't even get what's going on, right? This person did not get it, and hopefully they were fired. I don't know what happened to them. It's like, wait a minute. We could have had that computer called the Apple. We could have hired those two engineers and then made them do our bidding. They would have made it, and we would have sold it as the HP Apple. What just happened here? Right? They'd totally lose that opportunity. For a while, these people try to sell their idea to Commodore, right? Because Commodore is making a pet computer, right? But as you would imagine, somebody like him, and I really have not explained Jack Trammell yet, we haven't gotten there, but Jack is a very forceful person. These two are not going to get along, and that just did not happen, right? So they end up having to get a backer, and then make the computer and then become millionaires. And it's an incredible story. But let's move along in what happens at Apple and why Apple almost dies. So really, if you want to take a look at, well, what really is going on here? Well, Steve Jobs really screws things up. And that's because, I mean, come on, they're 20, right? They're in charge of this corporation. He's become a star, and he really likes that. Wozniak is like, I don't want to do that. But he becomes a star and is on all these magazines and newspapers because he's a 21-year-old genius that got this computer out there. The media loved these two, and especially this one, so much that you really got the opinion that there was Apple and there was IBM, which was not true, right? There's tons of stuff going on. So let's see what really messes them up. They produced this Apple II computer. It's fantastic. Many, many years prior, we're going to go back in time a little bit here. Back to, let's see, what is this, 50s, 60s? Mother of all demos. When was that done? I cannot remember. Sorry, 68. 1968. So this guy right here, Engelbart, he creates a system called the online system. And what he demos in 1968 off of a computer that can only do this, right, off of a mainframe, because that's the only power that really could do this kind of things. He gives a 90-minute presentation. You could still watch all of it. There are shorter versions that just kind of cut out some of the stuff you wouldn't be interested in. But he shows Windows. So we're not talking about Microsoft Windows. We're talking about having a screen with text in it that are in these different windows. That's what they called it. He describes hypertext, or how you could have text information with something in there and click on that that'll take you someplace else. He describes video conferencing and how video conferencing works. So I'm saying describe, but what I mean by that is he shows you that happening. He gets the computer mouse, right? He gets a computer mouse, and there it is, and you're working. He shows how you can dynamically link files together, right? Part of an operating system that shares libraries and executables. That's huge in computers. And then, of course, a collaborative real-time editor, Google Docs, right? He shows all this in 1968. And to his surprise, the microphone drops and nobody cares. Nobody does anything with this. The people in power that were doing computers at the time did not say to themselves, so in other words, you're talking about IBM here and NEC and all these people that are making mainframe computers, they did not take that and go, you know what? That is a bunch of really cool stuff. I wonder how we could implement that in next versions of what we're doing. They didn't even bother. They were just like, well, what we got works, so we're good to go. Nobody cares. Well, it spawned stuff at this location, Xerox PARC. So this is a Palo Alto research company, center, sorry, and it's for Xerox. So what ends up happening at Xerox? So pretty early on, I don't know if they saw that actual presentation, but it becomes very clear that they can see paper is going to go away. And you will see this. For instance, in the 80s, there was a lot of work on VR. Now, the truth is, when you're playing a computer game, that's VR. It's virtual reality, right? That's not reality, right? When you're playing that game. But we know VR has come to mean three-dimensional world that I'm seeing all around me. They were working on that in the 80s. AI, they were working on that in the 80s. Robotics, they were working on that in the 80s. And so as soon as this technology really starts to come out and be placed in the hands of people, not in large corporations, they begin to theorize and understand this is going to be big, this is going to be big, this is going to be big. The problem is that the hardware is not there yet. And so a lot of it does not come to fruition until now, right? AI is barely getting there because you've got to have the hardware that can actually give you a base foundation. And so I don't know if Xerox saw that and went, well, wait a minute, or they already kind of knew from everything that was going on that more and more is being put into these mainframes. And someday we won't need a printout. That's bad for a company that's solely based on printouts, copy machines. That's what they are. And so they found this research to basically just brainstorm. They take a bunch of bright, shiny people, set them all in bean bags, and you can see things about this. Set them all in bean bags and say, what do you think of? Oh, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? And no doubt a ton of them were influenced in there by this presentation, which, by the way, right, this is not like available for download back then. You either were at the presentation or read about it, right? So they look at this and go, okay, oh, what could we do then? What did we come up with? Laser printing came out of that, using a laser to print things. Ethernet, which is how we connect to the networks, local LANs, and is partially used in the internet. The personal computer with the GUI, a graphical user interface. The desktop paradigm, in other words, what I'm seeing as my graphical interface is my desk, and I have things on my desk. Object-oriented programming, being able to take a whole object, which you guys use, and they have you type out as you go along, you build a little program, but as you get more advanced, it's like, I need something that will do this, and you put the object in for that and set the variables. Object-oriented programming. Ubiquitous computing, meaning that it's everywhere and we can use whatever and it interacts and everything works. Electronic paper, of course, right? All this stuff, and the computer mouse, all of it came from Xerox PARC. The guy that really funded or founded Ethernet, the main thinker for that, took some people and he went off and made 3Com. 3Com was later bought by HP and it made millions off of that. The GUI, they actually made an Alto computer. So if they made a computer, so they used the technology, they used the technology to actually build this machine. Actually, I think I have a tab open that shows it. Hello. Alto computer. Xerox Alto. There it is. Notice that it's this way because that's a page of paper. Makes sense. Actually, we go this way. And to me, still to this day, I'm like, I don't think my monitors should be that way, right? Because I can hold a whole piece of paper on there. Anyway, So they actually make this thing, and this is the computer. Like I said, the technology was not quite there. This is not a personal PC. This thing costs a ton of money. So they produce this thing, and it costs, when is it introduced? March 1973. Apple made theirs in 77. Commodore made theirs in 77. IBM made theirs in 80 or 81. This predates them all. But the thing was $16,000. It had the ability to connect them together in a network. They had the ability to print, all of them to print to a certain machine or to a certain printer. All this incredible stuff was shown, but it was very, very, very expensive to buy. Now, what would have been the smart thing? So think about this. If you're Xerox and you create this and it's really, really expensive, but you think it's the future, what would you do? Hopefully, most of you are thinking, I would just keep selling it. You know, because here we are, right? $32,000 in 1979, which is $119,020. Not too many people are buying those. So they shipped 2,000 of the Alto 2s. That's all they shipped. So not a lot, but right here's the clock speed. You're running a six megahertz chip there. But you could have kept doing it. Instead, what the bigwigs looked at is like, this is a freaking waste of time and you're wasting all our money. Let's shut down the entire project. Everything's shut down. So forget it. It's all over. So they started out on a path, Xerox started out on a path to really revolutionize the world. When you look at what happened from Douglas Engelbart and the fact that they implemented almost all of those things, they basically were saying this is the future. They could have been IBM. They could have been Apple. As a matter of fact, Apple wouldn't have probably survived. As a matter of fact, they probably would have bought Steve Jobs, right? They would have bought Steve Jobs and Wozniak and said, you're going to work for us and make this stuff, right? So what does this have to do with Apple? Well, what happens is they've got the Apple II and it's selling gangbusters. It's going great. And they're selling them higher price than Commodore. So again, there's a lot more Commodores that are being sold because of what you can do with it and the fact that it's so much cheaper. But definitely Apple has got an area, right? They've got a lot of customers and they're doing very well and they're both millionaires. And so Steve Jobs gets a phone call, and I cannot remember her name, but basically one of the ladies that's over this stuff that's basically been vaulted, right? It's just been put in filing cabinets, says, you know what? I think there's something that you should see over here. And so she takes him and brings him in and shows him the Alto computer. Right? It was there since 73. And he's just like, boom, mind blown, right? Graphical user interface. This is it. This is it. And so from our professor, Engelbart, to Xerox and then over to Apple. The first graphical system that was sold is the Xerox Alto computer. The first graphical computer that was sold is Xerox Alto. So Engelbart, he showed you one, but that wasn't sold. This was actually sold, right? This one was sold in 1973, 74, 75. Basically, your Macintosh computer was this big at that time. So when Steve Jobs sees this, he's like, that's what we need to do. That's exactly what we need to do with our system. And this comes into the biggest mistake that Steve Jobs makes. And he has told people, he doesn't actually list specifically what I'm going to list as a mistake. But he knew that he made a bunch of mistakes because he was young and he didn't really understand what to do. So Apple II selling, they are upgrading that. They have like Apple IIe, Apple IIc. They have an Apple III that they make that's more powerful for business use. Also overheated and died. But they have this whole Apple II line. And this is where they didn't understand what was happening. And I'll also explain this in Commodore. That people were spending a ton of money on these machines. They did not want to go and spend a ton of more money on new software. That's something that Microsoft pretty much solely got right, and nobody else understood it. If they did understand it, they did not express it in the way of development. Microsoft made DOS, they made Windows 3, 3.1, Windows 95. Those are really their big successes. So I'm just covering those. And all the way in 95, you could run anything. That was all the way back to the beginning of the PC. If you were a company that spends $60 to $100 a pop, even in today's money, for thousands of machines that you have now at your company, that's a ton of money. And being able to say, I can upgrade the hardware and upgrade the system and still run that software and gradually upgrade that is a huge important factor. And Apple was doing that. They had Apple II, right? That was compatible with their other Apple II lines. Commodore had a Commodore 64. They did a 128. That was compatible with the 64, but nowhere near what they needed to do, right? When you look at what Microsoft did, you were talking about, we're upgrading graphics in here, we're upgrading sound in here, we're upgrading processors in here, but you could still run all the old stuff. That's epic for what they needed at the time, and they didn't get it. So the Macintosh, right? The Apple Lisa is actually the predecessor to the Macintosh. Hugely expensive, not too many sales. Macintosh was turned around and made, and that's where the name Mac comes from, because he created Macintosh 1979 and so on. And I have a picture here of, you know, one of those. I guess I could have left it on that page. There it is. There's the old Mac, and they brought that out in 1984. That was the biggest mistake they made. Steve Jobs came in and said, we need to rethink everything. We are competing with IBM, the big dogs. So we need to hit the stage huge. We need to show them up. We need to show that we are the best. And so by doing so, what we're going to do is create this hardware that will actually be able to render this information on the screen, and everybody will be able to use a GUI, and we're going to bring that to them, right? That's what he's thinking. And so they do get the credit for introducing this in 83 and 84. They're not the only ones doing it. As I said, Gem, I've got Gem up here someplace, 1985. So 1 year after what Mac does, the Gem graphical environment is released, and that's what it looks like. There it is. There's Gem 1.2 right there. It's color even. It even has color, and the Macs don't have any color. And then we'll get into Commodore later, but here's a Amiga. Put an Amiga OS 1.3 or 1.2, doesn't matter. And they bring this out in 85. All right, so it's not like Apple's the only one thinking of this and only one doing it. Lots of people saw the presentation, right? Lots of people know where this is going. Lots of people understand. And look, this is color too. And the machine costs the same price or less than what a Macintosh computer costs. So really, this is the mistake that Steve Jobs made. What he needed to do is continue his line of Apple computers. So let's look at the Apple, and it's actually two I's, Apple II GS. So the Apple II GS comes out, geez, you know, I can't remember. Let's look at the date on that. But there's the Apple II GS. That's what it looks like. So very much from our point of view as a computer user, very much like a Macintosh, except it's got some cool stuff because the screen's bigger and there's actual color instead of this little tiny black and white screen. Now the processor in this is not too bad of a processor either. And let's see, I believe this comes out in 86, if I remember right. It was a 16-bit personal computer. Let's just look at the Wikipedia page. Let's go there. Apple II 16-bit GS, Mac II. They ceased production in 92. So it's not really showing me. Let me pause this while I find it, because that's important. That's important. Sorry, I should have recognized. Here's the release date on the side. They always do that. 1986. So in 1984, you released this Macintosh computer. Not joking. They cost $3,500. They cost a ton of money for this Macintosh computer. If you want one that's really going to work, it's going to be $4,500. This one comes out 2 years later, and it's coming out as $999. Now, this is a 16-bit computer. The Macintosh is a 16-bit computer. Is the processor running slower? Yes. As a matter of fact, they handicapped the processor because they don't want it to be faster than the Mac. Now, there's a thread here that you're going to see through all of these things that come to the downfall. You have to innovate and let the innovation stand for itself. The minute you start to cap it from a business standpoint, right? Our Mac is our top line one. It's going to be faster than this other stuff. So we're going to cap the speed on this. You're artificially saying, slow this down because we want you to go use a Mac. That's not a good plan, right? If you were going to do something stupid like this and create a graphical Mac and a graphical Apple II, if you're going to do something stupid, let them compete against each other, right? Which today, that's why Apple doesn't try to hinder the pricing of anything. What do I mean by that? Because they're expensive, right? What I'm saying is that if you want to get an iPad, it's going to cost you a certain amount of money. And there are some very low-end tablets that they sell, not low-end. They really don't sell a low-end tablet. That's why they're $400. They sell a really nice, good tablet for $400. But when you start looking at power, RAM, storage, and all that, you can buy a MacBook for the same price that you can buy an iPad. They learned from this that you let the innovation stand on its own and you let people choose. And if you don't do that, you will end up suffering, potentially dying because of it. And that's exactly what happens because Apple is splitting its development and the Mac is taking tons of money to develop, tons and tons and tons of money to develop. Then the Apple II does not get the attention it needs. And then you split your customer base. So you don't have the customer base that IBM has. You have a smaller customer base. And that customer base really does want graphics, really does want sounds. The competitor that you're really dealing with there is Commodore. That's your biggest competitor in that scene. But you're not competing with them. You're saying, I'm going to compete with IBM. They have black and white screens. We'll make ours white and black. We're going to take a ton of money to develop this awesome machine. It's going to be so much better, so much faster. But because of what you're trying to do with the thing, it actually operates just as slow as this Apple II GS that does have color and sound and runs on a less processor, right? Something that's cheaper, but also less powerful. Yeah, that was dumb. That was extremely dumb. That was the worst mistake Apple ever made. If they had looked and said, well, you know, we got a customer base here, we don't want to lose them. Now we're going to have to create new hardware, but we don't have to create new software. So we could help out our customers by making sure that whatever we're running, whatever we do with our hardware, we'll make sure we're backward compatible so that they don't have to buy new software. They can do that gradually. That's something that we can do to help. Again, Microsoft's the only one that gets it. Nobody else gets it. But if they had done that at the time, they would have focused totally on their Apple II line. The GS would have come out probably at least a year earlier, if not earlier than what they released the Mac at. So they released that in '84 and they were pushing it. They probably could have released an Apple II GS in '82. And that would have just been phenomenal. That would have just blown the competition out of the water. And they could have done it. The Apple II GS was so backwards compatible, it actually had an Apple II computer in it. So they allowed themselves to say, we're going to upgrade, and the Apple II GS is very different, and that's going to give us a problem. So if somebody really wants that backwards compatibility, all they got to do is click an icon, and now they're in Apple II mode, and it's running on this little chip. That's how far the advancements in the technology had occurred. Everything in the Apple II is now just small. You can just put it on some chips and away you go. So basically what ends up happening is that because of everything that Steve Jobs does, he gets fired, he gets dropped from the board, he sells all of his stock, and he goes on to make Next Computer. which creates phenomenal, right? There's tons of stuff that come out of the Next OS and the Next Cube. So he doesn't land on his feet. He doesn't. It takes him a bit to get back going, but he still creates tons and tons of awesome stuff over here on the next computer. And then so that's Jobs was intrigued by Berg's concept of a workstation and contemplated starting a higher education computer in '85. And then, of course, he gets ousted. And I think that's around '86, I think, that he gets ousted. And so he creates a new team with a new thing. And these are really expensive computers and they do okay. But it turns out that all of his development and him growing up ends up becoming what saves Apple, because they never turn the Macintosh into anything, really. It has 10% of the market. It has the renowned, basically, place in history of saying we were the first popular graphics computer, or you could say home computer. Definitely, they did that. But then he left, developed Next. And if we look at Next Step, which was the operating system, you'll notice some very, very similarities to many of the operating systems from Microsoft. Microsoft took a bunch of stuff from them. And I might do a separate video on them, but that's how not understanding the situation at the time really hurt them. And Steve Jobs knew that. He's like, I was immature. I did some stupid things and it really hurt Apple. Later on, he gets to come back and in his much more mature way, takes Apple to basically the most wealthy tech company that we currently have. People don't like to talk about that. They like to hate Apple. And so they don't like to actually go, oh, okay, so actually they're massively popular and have trillions and trillions of dollars and control a huge portion of the tech world. But anyway, that's how Apple ends up just not winning. Splitting that focus between those two computers was not a good thing. Spending all that money on a technology where you could have just developed what you had and kept all your customers was clearly the way to go, but they didn't do that. And Wozniak still owns a lot of Apple stuff, and he's rich, and Jobs' wife is rich. But that's why Apple became the secondary thing that eventually gets reborn through the iPhone and the iPod, but never became what it could have been. Anyway, so that's the story of the two Steves and some people that did not get it, and how that has influenced what we could have in our lives. And we will talk to you later. Thanks for watching.